So these are the materials that you will need to make your petticoat. So for demonstration, I'm making a half scale. So what I need is some calico. So I've got 2 widths of calico at 27 inches deep. I've got 1/2 inch Petticoat, which is millinery Petticoat because it's a bit firmer. You could also use, this is polyester waistband. If you can still get it, it's kind of tricky to get hold of, but if you can, this is better to use. It's a lot firmer. But if not, we're just using millinery Petticoat. 1/2 inch India tape, and it's a good idea to wash these both prior to using them. So just run them under some warm water and iron them dry. Make sure they're completely dry. You will also need, so it's 1/2 meter of each of them. 1/2 meter of some 1/2 inch elastic, and a couple of safety pins, and a fastening. This is a number 3 hook and bar I have here. If you were doing it full scale, you'd need some bigger safety pins and a trouser hook and bar. And I would use 1 inch wide Petticoat and India tape. To make your bum roll, this is a full scale one, you need some India tape for the ties on your bum roll. So this is 1/2 inch India tape. For the half scale one, we're going to use 1/4 inch. You will also need some kind of stuffing. So I'm just using some scraps of wadding and pillow stuffing that's hanging around. So you'll need some of that. So, and plus your needle, thread, hand sewn needle, thread, and your machine. To cut your calico, if you look at this sheet of paper, pretend this is your fabric, and this is the length of your fabric, this is the width of your fabric. So up and down grain, cross grain. Your selvage is on either side. So we need, for our widths of fabric for the half scale, we need 54 inches long. So you've got your length of your calico, 54 inches. We're dividing it in half. So bottom to top, selvages on the side, fold it in half, and cut it. So you've got 2 separate lengths. And then they can be joined. So our fabric is 90, it's like 98 wide, the calico, 98, 99, just slightly under a meter. So we want to trim the selvages off because we don't want to incorporate them into it. So that'll probably take it down to about 95, 96. So we need 2 widths of this. And the drop of each section is 27 inches. 27 inches is 68, 69 centimeters. Within that, you've allowed for the hem and so 3 inches for the hem on a full size. For our half scale, it'd be 1.5 inches, which is 4 centimeters. So on a full scale, it would be 8 centimeters. On the top, we've allowed for 6 inches along the top. So 6 inches is nearly 16 centimeters. So you've allowed that for leveling that amount up there and for your hem. And then this bit in the middle to the end is petticoat gathering. Yeah. So what we're going to do is, then we're going to join these together and create a tube. So you can either join them with just a normal seam allowance and overlock it, or you could flat fell it. That's your choice. And then once we've done that, we can turn up our hem and create our hem. So I've got my 2 widths of calico, the 27-inch drop, and I'm just trimming off my salvages. You don't want to leave your salvages on because the fabric's like a little bit of a tighter weave there. And if it comes to get laundered, sometimes it can sort of shrivel a little bit and make your seam not look so nice. So trim them off, and then we're going to sew either side together. So you can either do a normal seam and overlock the seam allowances, or a flat fell, that's your choice. So I've sewn my 2 seam allowances together. I'm using flat felled. So flat felled is, I've staggered the edges, probably about 1/2 inch further out on the bottom one, and a narrower one here, a little bit less than 1/4 inch. And then I've ironed it over and tucked that edge under, and then top stitched it down here. So on this one you can see the top stitch. So that's how I finished my seams. And because there's only 2 seams on this, I'm making them go opposite ways so that they're going to face towards the back. And then it's created a tube. It's hard to show you on here. So it's one continuous piece, and it's like a tube, a large tube. So I've created my tube. I've flat felled the seams. I've hemmed it, so I've just turned it about 1/2 inch over and then back up again 1.5 inches. And I'm going to just machine this. So for petticoat, you can machine it. If you're doing it for a top skirt, I would hand sew that hem, and I would overlock that edge and turn it up, because the fact of turning this hem in creates a ridge, a thicker ridge. And never iron from the front, iron from the back, because depending on what your fabrics are, it could end up like a big ridge, and you end up with a line around where the hem is. And when it's on stage, the lighting picks it up, and you just see a big whacking hem all the way around. So very delicately iron from the other side and reduce your bulk as much as you can. So ideally I'd overlock that and lay it flat and hand stitch it down. But for the petticoat, we can machine it because it's underneath and it's not going to be seen. So your next step is to create a placket. So we're doing our placket on the front, so it's going to be in the center of a panel. So I'm going to do a continuous placket, but I'm going to do a really simplified one. So on your grain of your fabric, cut a straight line, really clean cut, 8 inches. This is what the final opening will end up, is 8 inches. But because we're putting our placket in before we level, you need to include it into all the leveling 6 inches as well. So if you're putting it in before, have a 14-inch opening. If you're putting it in after, an 8-inch opening. For half scale, you'll put a 7-inch opening. And then once you subtract the leveling, which is 3 inches, you'll end up with a 4-inch opening. So, very clean cut. On your grain. You've got your strip. So for the full size, you need a 2.5-inch strip. And you want to fold it in half, iron it, fold a 1/4 inch on either side, iron them, and then just check that they're level as you iron it. So this will become your placket. What you need to do is open up your opening, and you're going to sandwich it between your layers there. And what you're going to do is very gently stitch all the way along. When you come to this bit, just make sure you catch it at the point and then carry on down. So you're going to sandwich the two, do it in one go. So catch it, just check you caught it there. So you might have to pivot this a little bit as you do it. So stitch, stitch, slightly pivot it, and carry on to the end. So I'll just go machine this now. So here you can see I've machined it, and I've just done it with the sewing machine because this is a petticoat and underneath not going to be seen, so speeds up your time, you can machine it. So I've machined it all along the edge, making sure I've caught that point. Now I've ironed it so that it's a normal front opening for a woman. So this is against your body, and it's the right side over the left. Men are left over right. I'm doing it as a normal opening because the model can do that of themselves when they're dressing. If somebody's dressing the person, you do it the opposite way. So you just flip this over the other way. So that when they're dressing in, it's mostly people are right-handed, so it's easier for the dresser to come and do it up. So that's your choice. So if it was on the back, I would do it this way. But for front opening, because the client can, or model, can dress themselves, just do it the normal way. It's easier, quicker than trying to go the opposite way. So next step you're going to do now is you open this up, and at the base, we're going to stitch across here and then up here. So I've now machined it across and up, so I've laid this side of the placket down permanently, and you'll get it like that. So now, because this is a weak point here, if you just stitch across about 1/2 inch up, do a crisscross, whatever takes your fancy, and then that will secure it. And if you do that 1/2 inch up, that will leave you 7.5 inches, so 1/2 inch to go into the waistband, so you have a 7-inch opening, which is plenty. So it should be 6 to 7 inches opening. So here I've stitched across. So I've stitched across in the block and down that side again to make it really secure, because this is going to get a lot of wear and tear, so it's give it a lot of strength. And that's your placket. So if you're putting it in after the fact, make it 8 inches. If you're putting it in before you do your leveling, which is my preference, it's easier to do it 14 inches long, or for the half scale 7 inches. And then it just gets trimmed off when you do the leveling. And it just makes it easier. I find that it's all done. You don't have to go back and try and fiddle putting a placket in. But that's your choice. You can do it either way. And you don't have to use this placket. You can do whatever type of placket you want. This is just a simple one to do. So now we're going to create the little bum roll. So I'm making it in half scale again. I've drafted the little pattern, which is the sausage pad in the Jean Honeysett book. And I've folded my fabric on the straight, and I fold it in half. And I've traced around that. And I'm just going to cut a small seam allowance, about 1/4 inch. And on my edge of my point, I've just made it straight, so it makes it easier to catch my India tape in there. So I need to cut 2 of these out, so top and bottom. And it's an idea if you retrace the other side so you can see your seam allowance. And I need to cut another one of that out, so I've got 2 pieces. So here's the 2 pieces cut out. I've retraced my other half, so I've got a stitch line to follow. And I've used my 1/4 inch India tape, cut it in half. I think it was 1/2 meter, just slightly over. So I've got 2 ties on either side. I'm sandwiching them in the points. I've cut the points flat so it's easier to sew my tapes into there. So on each side, so in between the 2 layers, I've sandwiched it. So I'm going to machine from here, around, across, and come around, making sure I don't catch my India tape so I can tuck it in once I've got that top bit sewn, and stitch around. Same on the other side, leaving a probably 2-inch gap so I can put the stuffing into it. And then if you look, we'll close it up by hand after. So this is it stitched around, so I've stitched around across. Looks like a little canoe. So next step is to clip all my curves. So I need to cut little triangles out. Make sure you're using the tip of the scissors. And you don't cut through your stitch line. I've also done a small stitch around there, so number 2. So it's firm. So you need to do that all the way around, and on the inner curve, you just clip. So here it is, all cut out, all clipped on the curves, and now I can just pull it, bag it out. So this will take a little bit. When you sew across this point here, sew a few times to secure it, because you can pull it out. So, see? Same on the other side. Right, so we've got our little bum roll. Now we need to stuff it. So gently pack it in, make sure it's really snug and your pad is hard. Don't just stuff it a little bit like that and then it's not doing much. You want to pack it really tight. Yeah, so pack the whole thing. Here's your little bum roll, it's stuffed. And now it just needs to be closed, so you can whip stitch that closed. So if you look on the full size one, just do a whip stitch along there and close it up. Then you've got your bum roll. So quartering your petticoat, so you need to find the center front, the center back, and the side seams. So in this case on the half scale, we know that the two seams that I flat felled and going towards the back are the sides, the true sides. And then in the middle of it, center front, and then underneath would be the center back. So to make it easier to see, so I've got a tube and I've folded it flat to the sides, so I've marked them with pencil, and then I've folded it again in half, and that's giving me my center front, and at the back it's the center back. So this is the center front, this is the center back, and these are the side seams for now. But what you want to do for your petticoat, you want more volume at the back to go over your bum roll. So we're going to move these side seams forward. So on a full scale, you would bring them both forward 6 inches on either side, but on the half scale, we are bringing them 3 inches. I'm going to guess on here. So I brought them up 3 inches on either side evenly, and then mark it so you can see it. So it's a good idea if you do these with a tacking line. So these are your side seams. So if you mark the front and back with a red thread and then another color for the sides so you know which is which. And then when you put it onto the stand, these will sit at the side, true side of your stand, center front, center back, and you would pin them in place. So if you flatten it out, you can see it like that. So I've quartered my petticoat, my center front with the placket, and I basted my placket shut. My center back, and I basted a tacking line, so I know that's the center back. And my side seams were here, and I brought them 3 inches forward from the seam. For the full size petticoat, you would bring it 6 inches forward, and I've tacked it with the green thread on either side. So I know all them points are definitely there. And I've tacked it, I have 3 inches allowance for leveling. I've tacked it the full 3, just slightly past it, so I can see it when I'm adjusting it. So I still know I'm in the correct place. So now to prep my waistband, I want to put a little pleat in here to allow for alterations once the waistband is on it. If you put a little 1 inch deep pleat on the waistband at the center back, because we're doing a center front opening, that gives you room that if there's an alteration, they can just undo that, undo a couple of pleats, undo that, and then just sew it along, and they've added 2 inches or 1 inch, whatever they want to, how much they want to use. So it's good practice to do that. It's a quick alteration. So you need to go on the full size, you need to go in 1 inch, and same on your India tape. So find the middle and just machine stitch across 1 inch. On the half scale, do 1/2 inch. So once it's opened, that would give you an extra inch. Or on the full size, the inch being open would give you an extra 2 inches. So this is the 2 little pleats sewn in. And what you want to do is you'll put this around the waist with the little pleat facing in towards the fabric. You pleat all your fabric on, and then when you're finished, you'll put the India tape and sandwich the pleats between it. But you want these so it's not as bulky, butterflied, one going one way, the other going the other way. So when they're on top of each other, they're not adding a great big lump in one place. When you come to do the ends where your fastening will be, it's a good idea to leave another extra couple of inches. So if you fold it 2 inches down and 1 in for full size, then you've got 2 inches there for alterations. So on the half scale, 1 inch, so half up and half. So on my stand, I pinned my waistband in place with my little pleat at the center back. I've tied my bum roll on, and now I've got my elastic, which I'm going to bring over top of that, over top of the waistband. Now I would sandwich my body of my skirt between here and the waistband, and put my center front where the placket is here, my side seams that are tacked in the green at the side, and my center back at the very center of the back that's tacked in red. And then I'm ready to start pleating. So I put my petticoat onto my stand now, over my bum roll, over top of my waistband, and in between the waistband and the elastic. I've got my placket at the center front here. I've got my new side seam where the green thread is, at the true side of the stand. And then if you look at the red is at the back. So it's a good idea to pin these in place so they don't shift on you. And then I've started pleating up, so I want to leave a flat piece at the front, so this is where your bodice comes down. So usually on normal size you want 3 to 5 inches, which is sort of 7.5 to 12.5 centimeters, and on a half scale you'd want 1.5 to 2.5 inches, which is roughly 4 centimeters to 6 to 7 centimeters. So I've left a good inch on either side. And I've pleated up. So I've started pleating roughly. And I'm pleating, I pleat going towards the front, center front. Roughly about ½ inch deep. Until I get to the side. And then when I get to the side, I switch directions. So I'm creating a box pleat at the side, and then pleat towards the center back. And then I would do the same on the other side. You just need to do the half side for now. And then once you've done that, establish your length again, so make sure your length is correct. And your length you would want, usually your top skirt you'd want it 1 inch from the floor so you don't trip when you're walking. So your petticoat I would make another inch shorter than your top skirt. Make sure as well if you're putting any decoration on the hems, so if you're making a frill or if you're cording, you do that prior to this step. So I'd get my frill on there and then I would level. So I've established my length that I want, and then so it would be shorter than the ground. And then it's a good idea if you drop your stands. That gives you a level to pleat against, so then just double check you're happy with it. And it's all touching the floor level all the way around. And once you're happy with that, oops, stand slipping, be careful of that. Once I'm happy with it, I come along and just chalk underneath my elastic so I know where my level is. So you just need to do 1/2 at this stage, and then you can take this off of the stand. Undo it, and then you can check the other side and mark the two so they're exactly even. And And then you're ready for your next step. So you took your petticoat back off the stand, lay it out flat, and you have your little marks. I've already chalked it. You can see these little marks here was where I ran the chalk along the bottom when it was on the stand underneath the elastic. So now I've just come along and I've smoothed out this line, using them as my guide. I can follow the dips. Now, once I've drawn that line, I can transfer that information to the other side. So with a bit of carbon paper underneath, I'm gonna wheel that information to the other side. So it's copied on the reverse. And then, so then I can cut the excess off. So for full scale, I would leave a couple of inches. For the half scale, leave about an inch. Now you need to pleat back up and put it back and attach it to the waistband. So if you're really good at pleating, just pleat it up. A little trick, if you're not so hard at pleating, you could cartridge pleat this up if you know how deep your pleats are. And leave some room with your cartridge pleating threads and you can adjust it. So I've just roughly been pinning it on the flat back into the pleats. And my pleats are about an inch deep. So it'll be 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. On this side I've cartridge pleated up. It's rough, it just does it quickly. And I can pleat them and I can adjust them. Keep my threads long and I can adjust them and they're a little bit controlled. So that's up to you. This is easy on the full scale. Makes your life a little bit easier. This is better on the half scale because it's so little and it's fiddly. So I roughly pleated freehand onto the waistband to where I'd quartered it, so the center back had the little pleat, my side seams and my center front. So I'm going to undo my placket. So I can get it back on the stand. So here it is back on the stand after I pleated it on the flat, on the table. And I'm just checking to see if it fits. So make sure you have a little bit of ease on your waistband. You don't want it cutting into them. So usually if you can stick your finger behind it, a couple of fingers, that'll give it a little bit of ease. So I'm checking that it closes. Just a little, needs just a little touch loosening off. Am I happy with the way all my pleats are sitting? So I'm just going to go over them, check them, make sure they're level, they look pretty, and I'm happy with them. Then I can take this off and machine it to this waistband, trim the excess off, and then I'll lay the India tape on top. And I've machine stitched down the center of my Petersham with a larger stitch. And now I need to trim away the excess, so it looks like that. So it's just slightly short of the waistband. So because I've stitched down the middle, I can push that fabric out of the way. And cut. Just take your time. You don't want to slip and cut through your waistband. So it will look like that on the other side. And then you will come along and place your India tape so you can see where my little pleat is on my waistband, going that way. I'm going to put this one going the opposite way. And I'm going to top stitch on outer edge all the way along to encase it. So now I've took it off the stand. I've top stitched my India tape top and bottom along the Petersham, so sandwiching the pleats between the India tape. Don't forget to put your hanging loops in. For the half scale, I'm using 1/4 inch India tape. You use 1/2 inch for full scale, and make them about, once they're folded, 4 inches long. So it's about 23 centimeters in length. In length, fold it in half, and that'll leave you about 4 inches. I'm just doing that on the half scale as well. And tuck them into your waistband before you sew it, preferably. And then stitch across so that they hang inside. I've left myself a little tail on either side. This is for alterations as well. So for the full scale, I'd leave a couple of inches, so I can fold it back one and then underneath. For the half scale, I've left 1.5 inches. It should be 1 inch, but it becomes a little bit fiddly, so I've just left 1.5 inches. So I turn it back on the edge of my placket and under again, and then secure that down. The reason you're doing that, do it on the other side as well. The reason you're doing that is for quick alterations. So like we left the little pleat in the center back, if this needed to be let out 1 inch or 2, you could just come along, just undo that little section, let the pleats go, undo them 2 little pleats in there, let these pleats go, and then bring it out. And you got a quick alteration. If you need more, you can do it from the front. You could just undo that little bit up to the first or second pleat, release a pleat, move it along, and then secure it back up. So it's quick. Instead of having to take the whole lot off and repleating it, you just got to do a little section. So that's for quick alterations in theatre. When you've sewn these down, you'll put your poppers on. So for a full scale, you use one of these little trouser hook and balls. And for the half scale, I'm just using a number 3 hook and ball. So stitch them on as normal. And that's your petticoat.